Hey everybody, and welcome once again to You're Just Stupid, the podcast that makes you smarter and stupider at the same time. I'm here, of course, with my always ever-present co-host, Ray, aka somehow even more stereotypical than Short Round. And of course, who could forget me, Rene, aka Darwin's Abortion. Now, unlike a lot of other episodes, Ray actually told me what's going on today. And I actually know, but instead of me talking about it, because this was all Ray's idea, actually, this was all Ray's idea, this podcast, y'all having to put up with me for 30 minutes to an hour at a time, everything, me not being aborted by Darwin, everything.
Yes, that was my decision, actually.
Yeah, she actually went back in time and prevented Darwin from aborting me.
My other AKA is Darwin's biggest mistake ever. AKA not having Rene get abortion.
Instead of getting aborted. Well, speaking of big mistakes, Ray, wow, that was a great segue. It's almost like we know what we're doing now.
Man, let's not get carried away there, Rene.
I mean, we are just stupid.
That just was purely serendipitous. So we're talking about the worst mistake possibly in human history. I would say very arguably in human history, because this is monumental. I don't know a word bigger than monumental, but
it's a good word. It's a good word. So we're talking about me not being aborted today, guys.
Yes.
So let's begin. So back in 1985. Wait, hold on. That's not what we're talking about.
You know what, guys? Stop writing your angry letters. Shut the hell up. We're not talking about Rene getting aborted. Okay, he doesn't.
It's not too late to abort
me.
It's not too late to abort me.
He's still viable.
Just put me in the trash.
I
don't have a heartbeat. It doesn't count.
Because you don't have a heart. He's got 3 assholes, but no heart. Tell me that, guys.
Let's talk about what we're actually going to talk about today, Ray.
Yeah, we're talking about the worst mistake in human history, and I don't have
What is that?
Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today, because it's kind of a huge debate. Not really a huge debate, because you don't hear a lot of people talking about it that often, because it's kind of like a no-brainer that people think it's a wonderful thing that we did, but it wasn't necessarily wonderful. And I'm talking about the invention, or I wouldn't say invention, the start of agriculture in human society.
So basically what you're saying, the worst mistake in human history is agriculture, correct?
Yeah, so oh my God, I was going to say the United States. The United States starting hunting and gathering. But no, I'm talking about hunting-gathering society that we used to have, changing and now becoming a agricultural or agrarian society.
Okay.
Where we plant food and it grows in crop form instead of just like looking at the ground and being like, oh, there's food there, let's get it.
So essentially, as we transition from being hunter and gatherers to developing horticulture, agricultural, and becoming our supposed descent onto modern man, correct?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's... Oh, go ahead.
But traditionally, so I was just going to say, traditionally, this is held as like a good thing. Like, this is as we're being a sign of progress. Like, we went from, like, just literally just grabbing insects off the ground and eating them to, like, knowing which berries and mushrooms were not poisonous and being able to find inventive ways to capture prey and animals, and to eventually, farming and growing grains and fruits and tubers and all sorts of
and that was
stuff.
Part of our progress as human beings.
Right.
We're now not picking shit up the ground. We now have settlements.
Well, I mean, that's also a sign of progress of humanity. Also, when we stopped picking turds off the ground and we realized they were not food.
Did you stop doing that?
Just last week.
Oh,
you haven't stopped yet?
No, I've stopped, but that's just because I read the sign not to.
They have laws against it now?
No, there's no laws. You can continue to do it.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
Because I forget sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, this is America, land of freedom.
America, you can pick up shit off the ground if you want to.
If you want to. God, I love this
don't
country.
Don't eat the yellow snow.
Don't eat the yellow snow, guys.
Absolutely
that's actually
not.
Even the hunter and gatherers knew better than do that.
Yes. So back to hunter-gatherers.
Mm-hmm.
So this transition from the hunter-gatherer lifestyle, where us prehistoric humans used to go around and just pick up shit off the ground or go hunt a deer or capture a fish. This whole thing's called the Neolithic Revolution. That's a fun little tidbit of what we call it, which we probably heard of in school, because we do touch upon this briefly. At least in the United States we do. But like Rene was saying, we do see it in kind of a progressive kind of way, like, oh yes, this is so wonderful that we did this and we discovered seeds and farming and mass production of food. It's so wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know if it is that wonderful. That's what we're making the argument about today, Rene.
Okay. How would you like to do this? Do you want to take one side, I take the other, or we just sit here and yell at each other and continue to pick turds off the ground?
I'm not saying we have to stop doing that, but why are there so many turds on the ground where you're recording?
There aren't a ton of turds on the ground where you record. You've lived here, right?
Not a ton, but
okay,
a normal amount.
Huh. So what is the overall? Because like I said, traditionally the argument is that as we move from hunter and gatherer society to an agricultural society, we made progress. But today you want to take the devil's advocate argument and say, no, it wasn't a good thing. What is your thesis on this? Like, where are you coming up with this?
Well, it's not only my argument. So this is from an original article posted by Jared Diamond that's called "The Worst Mistake in the History of the Human Race."
Just to give a brief background on Jared Diamond,
Sure.
Sorry to cut you off, right?
No, we should shout him
out. Rather famous author, most famously wrote the Pulitzer Prize winning novel Guns, Germs, and Steel. So he's done a lot of like research on science, anthropology, history, sociology, and just kind of like a lot of times what he does is he makes arguments against some of the traditional norms. One of the most famous ones was this early article of his where he combats the notion that agriculture was a progress forward in human history. Though interesting enough, in kind of some research I did, he may not have been the first. I think it was more, I guess the best way to say it is Jared Diamond's kind of the guy who took it out of the academia and journal articles and did it more on a popular basis. Like the article that Ray's reading from is from Discover magazine. And a lot of his other articles were from magazines and mass-distributed mass print books, not just, your average journal article in a scholarly journal.
Right. It was a little bit more of a taboo topic, this view, because I don't think as humans we like to think that we made a mistake. So I think that a lot of people like to skirt around this topic. They don't really like to discuss it.
I kind of liked how he kind of summed it at the beginning, how that we as humans, and we do have this bias as a species, that we are unique. We are God's chosen species. We are, we're highly unique in the universe. And as science has progressed on, as he sums it up, and I'm just going to quote him directly on this. Astronomy taught us that Earth isn't the center of the universe, but merely one of billions of heavenly bodies. From biology, we learned that we weren't species created by God, but evolved along with millions of other species. And so that kind of sums up Ray's point, I think, pretty well, that we're egocentric as a species. Makes sense. We are possibly the only sentient species even then, that's even becoming more and more under question debate as more research is done on other species.
Oh, and want to scare like an old white person more than anything else in the world is tell them that, humans might not be the only smart people. This whole thing, started about 2 million years ago, hunter-gathering, and it was basically the most successful lifestyle for humans that ever existed. Because if you think about it on a huge scale, we've only been doing the hunter-gatherer, only been doing the agricultural thing for a very, very, very small portion of human existence.
Yeah, I think I remember someone saying, like, if you put human history on a clock, and midnight is where we are today, and, a midnight of the first day is the start of human age, and midnight at the end of the first day is where we are at today. I think we've only been, like, an agricultural society since, like, 11:57 p.m. So much of human history,
It was like 6 minutes of being an agricultural over the 24 hours.
Yeah, it's a very small portion of actual human history.
So we're pretty new at this, and we don't really know.
I still can't grow corn.
Oh, I don't like physical labor in any capacity. So yeah,
because you're white.
Foam. That's for a whole other. It's because I'm a woman.
Oh, I wasn't gonna go sexist like that. I was just gonna go racist.
Oh, great! I'm all excited for the sexist and racist fan mail that we get.
Okay, we're definitely getting this part out. Hi-yo.
So yeah, 2 million years ago, we started hunting gathering, and then we kind of
Yeah.
stopped that as a people about 12 to 10,000 years ago. And it's not like, it started in one part of the world and then everyone told everyone and everyone started doing it. It kind of popped up randomly and independently in different
Hmm.
areas. So like they're growing the more natural stuff in their areas. So like in Southwest Asia, you're going to see like a lot of rice production. In the East, you're going to see the wheat, the barley, the rye. In Central and South
Hmm.
America, you're going to see the corn, the potatoes. And they all started farming and doing this independently of each other's societies. So it started popping up everywhere. And don't think that like we're done hunting and gathering today,
Oh,
because we
no,
still
no.
have tribes that use the hunter
Absolutely.
gatherer lifestyle on the planet, which is very, very useful in terms of research and studying how they live.
So actually, interesting enough, that was actually one of my counterpoints actually to this article because Jared Diamond mentions that indeed there are, the famous Bushmen and all these other terms that are used for various hunter and gatherer societies. But interesting enough, and I think actually he does mention it a little bit in his article on his own. But like even the hunter and gatherers today is not really necessarily extrapolate well to hunter and gatherer back then because we're modern man. We've taken all of the best land already, so they live off of the worst land, the worst areas. But they're still able to hunt and gather successfully. But it always wonders if does modern hunter gatherers correlate to ancient hunter gatherers. I mean, it's obviously the best thing we have, obviously, but it's gonna be hard to say everything correlates. But actually, kind of bringing back to your point, kind of even taking it back a step further, Ray. You did mention diversification. One thing I did as I was researching this article, I saw that even in hunter and gatherer society, not to go conspiracy theory, but you know how there's always like people who are like, oh, how did we invent the pyramids? And as I was doing research, one person's like, well, how did all these different societies on other continents develop agriculture? It must be aliens. No. So, and I was like, no, we're not going to do conspiracy theories. I'm not talking about that.
Not
But
today.
no. I mean, we'll have fun with that in other episodes.
Sure.
But like, not today. No. But anyways, and I was thinking about this as you were talking about this, and it kind of makes sense because even in hunter and gatherer society, we were very diverse in how we hunted. And it's kind of something that gets kind of glossed over a lot of times.
Great segue.
When you think about it this way, hunter and gatherer society in Europe differed a lot than those who went in Australia or South America. So, like for example, the Inuit, formerly known as the Eskimos,
Mm-hmm.
had some really advanced tools, actually even more advanced than like a lot of farming societies, because they didn't just have to capture. They had to capture a lot of like aquatic animals and aquatic species, sometimes very dangerous species, and so they would use very advanced tools versus like some of the hunter and gatherer societies in like Central Mexico, Central America, and South America actually would use fire to shape the jungles and the forest around them, and to basically control like where certain animals live, so that and where certain plants live, so they could actually hunt and gather in the areas that they chose.
Oh,
So
that's
it kind of
interesting.
and so it kind of made me think of like how could these different societies all develop agriculture in their own meaning ways? Well, obviously they all had different tools and tricks, and
Mm-hmm.
just like Ray said, we found this tuber in the ground, this root. We pick it up, we eat it. It's pretty good. You know what? Let me save a little bit of that and see. Actually, we saw the wise man. He's put a little bit back in the ground to give back to the earth spirits, and the earth spirits grant us with more tubers. So we're going to keep doing that. And probably something similar like that. Like they threw away the husk of fruit. And as hunter and gatherers migrate, the very seasonal migration, actually, there's a lot of research I did that also showed that the hunter and gatherers in general would move along with the seasons and basically track animals. They would track antelope and elk and bison and even plants as the seasons go. And they would know, like, okay, when it's the hottest weather, we go to this area and we have the hot weather plants. And when it's cold, we go to this other area. And basically, I could see where, like, okay, they probably left all the discarded fruit there, blah, blah, blah. And then they come back next year and like, oh, hey, that's where we left all the rotted fruit that we threw out last year. And then that's probably like the basic early start. Yeah, the early start of like, oh, we plant seeds in the ground. And then maybe more deliberately like, okay, the medicine man says we need to put the wise guy man says we need to put the fruits back in the earth, give back to the earth. I mean, that's when they were essentially planting plants.
Right.
Or like, yeah, exactly. And so that's why I'm thinking how all this evolved, that it wasn't no grand plan, any grand design. It was it's trial ever. And of course, this also, as Ray said, it's taken place over hundreds of thousands of years. So it's not like one day I was like trying to stab a fucking saber-toothed tiger with my spear, and the next day I'm like, this is bullshit. I'm gonna go plant some corn instead.
He's on a John Deere tractor.
Yeah, I picked up a John Deere tractor, go plant some corn, and then, it becomes shit that's made out of corn. God damn it, I can't. It becomes Fritos. There we go.
If
corn
John
becomes
Deere
Fritos.
sponsors us, my grandfather will be so proud of me.
If John Deere sponsors podcasts in general, I think your grandfather would be proud.
Thanks, Bill. Let's talk about a little bit of the good things. Because hunter-gatherers are very much perceived as like kind of a ghoulish lifestyle, something that you didn't want to live out. So there's definitely some myths with hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Oh, you're too stupid to farm, so you just have to look around for your food, and you're probably going to starve all the time, and all you do is walk around and look for your food and try to find
my
food.
lifestyle.
Yeah,
my
exactly.
Lifestyle. The lifestyle of a meth head. You're too stupid to grow food. You just wander around trying to find more food, and maybe every once in a while you stumble upon something.
That was the initial perception of what a hunter-gatherer was. That was taught to us in school. Exactly like a meth head. They would just scratch at themselves all day.
Mm-hmm.
And
flinging their shit at each other.
My God, I missed that meth head, I guess. So let's talk a little bit about the good things of hunter and gathering. So first of all, it was thought that they were kind of starving all the time and always looking for food. But they did do a study that was shown in the article we've been talking about of Bushmen in Africa, and they showed that each week they only looked for food 12 to 19 hours a week, which isn't really a lot if you use that like as a work day, because you think an average farmer is probably like on the farm like long days each week. And then another tribe in nomad in Tanzania worked only 14 hours a day or less looking for food. That's not a lot of time.
No, I mean, not really, especially when you consider farming. And, I mean, you can ask any even modern-day farmer, let alone, someone who uses older practices. They have to spend all day farming, essentially. And it's from a dawn to dusk type of thing every single day to ensure crops grow and, they get a good, proper yield. And I thought that was interesting, too, because a lot of times, too, and I alluded to this earlier, but yeah, long story short, ancient hunter and gatherers were not dumb. We always think of like,
they knew all the tips and tricks. They were like,
exactly, exactly, and they had to have known what are edible plant sources. How could we? And I think to a degree also they had ways to store food, not as advanced as salting meat or storing barley and wheat and granaries and stuff like that. But they understood how to prepare food so that if they couldn't find anything the next day, they had some food. And they even had tips and tricks to acquire, and they actually, I think back then, they would honestly eat anything, any animal they could catch. So if...
Yeah, they could, which meant they had a huge variety in their diet, which is fantastic.
Exactly.
Instead of having Oh, sorry, you finishing your point?
Yeah, sorry. So it would be like one of those things where like, oh, shoot, we're tracking the deer. Oh, the bear got the deer. Well, no, they would actually be willing to kill and eat the bear. And obviously a bear composition is different than deer composition, which is different than a rabbit, which is very different from obviously a berry or a root in the ground or nut or anything like that.
So Rene, let's compare that then to what we're talking about agriculture, because you're talking about these hunter-gatherers eating all these different types of food, that whatever they find, and then compare that to the agrarian lifestyle at the time, and they might be only eating, potatoes and cow because they got a big cow farm.
So they're all Irish.
Right. They're all Irish. So that's all they have is they got potatoes and cows. So they're going to have...
And whiskey.
So they're going to have a very limited diet compared to these hunter-gatherers that are eating whatever they find. So I'm going to go back to those Bushmen we were talking about, those African Bushman tribe we were talking about from the article. And they said that they were tracking what they were eating. And during a month where they got a good amount of food, each Bushman had about over 2,100 calories a day, which is phenomenal.
I was like, that's solid. That's only like a third of an American's average daily caloric consumption, but that's still pretty solid.
That's
what we're
like what we're
supposed to eat.
supposed to eat a
That's what we're
day.
supposed to eat a day versus,
Right.
like Ray alone consumes about 8,000 calories a day, and
I'm
I
sure
consume
I
about
do.
9,000.
I was eating a piece of pizza when I came on the chat, and I did
She
not
was eating
hunter
the whole
gather
pizza.
that.
She's lying to all of you. She unhinged her jaw. It was gross.
Oh, I would love to do an episode about how
Unhinging your jaw.
well, how snakes eat, but I can picture all the jokes that go along with that one.
Yeah,
Unhinging your
yeah.
jaw.
I'm gonna take the high road on this one, guys.
So going back to the Bushmen, they had over 2,100 calories a day, and that
Hmm?
included 93 grams of protein, which is
Damn.
yes, that would. I mean, I would think that's really sustainable. And obviously, they've been living like that for God knows how long. That's another reason that they were talking about how hunter-gatherers lifestyle is better than we thought in the past. So we already talked about the increased food variety that hunter-gatherers had.
And so, just kind of to add to that, also, one thing that we really didn't, like a lot of, especially early agriculture, we didn't do things like till soil, rotate crops, and stuff like that, until much later on in history. So, I could definitely see, for even a huge chunk of our history where we performed agriculture and stuff like that, we didn't have good crop rotation where it's like, okay, this year we are a corn farm. Next year we are a wheat farm. Next year after that we're gonna grow dates. Obviously that's a diverse amount of climates, but you get what I mean. Like we didn't have that knowledge for a long time too. Legitimately, there was a time period where agriculture, I would say, had a very limited diet. It's like, okay, we grow wheat, then we
That's
have
it.
an excess
We
amount of
eat.
wheat. Yeah.
Right. They didn't understand all the different food groups that we have and all the things that we
Yeah.
need to eat.
Yeah, exactly. And interestingly enough, hunter and gatherers may also have even had things like bread and other stuff, very crude forms of it, but even then they may have had examples of stored grains too. So that's not just a product of agriculture too, of like saving food for later.
Right. And with only having like one or two crops that you produce in a society, you have a higher likelihood of a famine, right? Or a bad crop year. Because if all of your crop is shit that one year, then that's your whole food supply or the whole town's food supply. And it's going to cause a lot more devastation to that one place. So that's what also makes it difficult to do agriculture because you are at that higher risk. And I was reading a study that was done in 2014 on current hunter-gatherer tribes. And this is outside of the article I found this. They were saying that in hunter-gatherer societies, they found that they were a lot less likely to have a famine than agrarian societies, which is notable.
So interesting enough, I looked up a little bit about that to say, was this hypothesis true that every agricultural or agrarian society always have worse rates of disease? And honestly, the answer, what I found is actually it seems to be more mixed. There was Diamond draws from a famous article that talks about these famous mounds in Mississippi that are ancient mounds that basically are multi-layered mounds, and basically and each layer shows a different layer of human history, essentially, from agricultural society, pre-hunter and gatherer society. But anyways, in those mounds, it very much shows the rates of disease were indeed worse, and those are the what he found. But
This is
we
the
also
one at Dickson Mounds that we were talking about?
Yeah, the Dr. Dickson mounds. Yes, correct. That's them.
No, I don't think he's a doctor. This was at they were called Dickson Mounds.
Oh, they were called Dickson mounds? Okay.
But there could have been a doctor called Dickson Mounds.
Possibly. But anyways, so at Dickson's mounds, they saw all of this. And then
Can I tell you exactly what they found? Because I have it right in front of me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Again, so this was a study that was done at the Illinois and Ohio River valleys at Dickson Mounds, and they found that the hunter-gatherers versus the farmers had a 50% decrease in enamel defects. So the hunter-gatherers had less enamel defects in their teeth, which was indicative of malnutrition. They had a 4-fold decrease in iron deficiency anemia, and that was evident in their bones. And then they had a 3-fold decrease in bone lesions, which is indicative of infectious disease. And they also had a decrease in degenerative diseases in the bones, in the spine, which is reflective of physical labor. So these hunter gatherers, just from looking at their skeletons, were so much healthier as compared to their agrarian brothers in terms of their physical health. I thought the physical labor one was really interesting
Yeah.
because you think of like hunter gatherers, they're walking all day, they're going to be in good shape, but they're not like bending over and using all those like weird tools and machines that all those agrarian workers are using, which is probably not made for our body and our skeleton to do. So that causes all those degenerative changes.
You bring up that point, and it was right about the Dickson Mounds, but I found another article by Goodman and Armelagos, published in 1985, so 2 years before the article we talk about today, and they actually looked at 23 different regions, and what they found was mixed results. But the biggest conclusion overall that was drawn was that actually it wasn't necessarily agriculture itself that did it, because in North America, famously, a lot of the societies, like the Mayan society and other societies, had developed agriculture. They didn't have a higher rate of disease. It was actually animal domestication that actually seems to be the biggest link to disease. That's just a hole in Diamond's logic. So it's actually, and it kind of makes sense too.
They kind of go hand in hand though, because once you start
true.
domesticating plants, you start domesticating your animals, because that started right after.
Not every agricultural society domesticated animals at the same rate. In fact, they mentioned that Europeans domesticated more than like Central and South Americans, and which is famously why when the Spaniards came over and tried to conquer the New World, their diseases wiped them out because Europeans were immune to all these diseases, versus Central South Americans weren't exposed to them. I don't know, that one I kind of debate whether agriculture always really led to more disease. Definitely animal domestication. I mean, and if you really say, oh, that's just a product of back in the day, fucking monkeypox, guys.
Well, we can talk about, because I see your side of the argument talking about the disease part of it. But then if you also think about it in terms of population density, because another thing that agriculture did was it increased the population density.
True.
So when people are living close together, disease is more likely to spread, where if you're just living in these little nomadic communities with like 30 to 50 people, it's a lot harder to spread
it would
epidemic.
Wipe out the whole community, exactly.
And
but
then
the whole
spread
community
to
was
another
30 people versus 5,000 or something. Yeah, and it seems that to a degree that is true, but it seemed like the biggest thing is you need a source, and the source is going to be animals. I mean, like I said, look at monkeypox. It actually comes from rats.
Rat pox doesn't have the same ring to it.
Rat pox doesn't hit as hard, so that's why we call it monkeypox.
Ooh, next AKA rat pox.
Rat pox, there you go. Or just pox in general, pox on your family.
Yeah, so the population density increased so much, and there was a couple of reasons for that when we transitioned from hunter-gatherers to agriculture. And that's because when you're able to grow a big farm full of crops, you can stay in one home for a long amount of time because you're going to be using that field every season, and a lot of other people are going to have their diets based on that crop that you're growing, so they're going to move around you as well.
Well, you're also getting specialization of labor. Eventually, if you get enough of a yield, instead of everyone need to be relying on growing food or gathering food, now you have someone like, okay, Bill grows the food, but Steve over here is the one who collects the food and puts it in his granary, and then Mike is the one guy who turns all that into bread or other ways to consume it.
Right. There was no division of labor pre-agrarian times.
Right.
There was a lot more specialties.
It was a lot cruder. It was definitely a lot cruder, I would say, because as I've read on, there is definitely not every single person, even a hunter-gatherer society, was involved in hunting and gathering. There's still other people who seem to have roles, and that's kind of, I'll allude to that because we'll talk about that more in a moment, as in the article, Mr. Diamond talks about agriculture being the source of inequality also as well.
Yeah, that's actually where I was just going to it next, because I thought that was really interesting to think about, because with agrarian society, you can obtain a surplus. And with a surplus, you have control over people that no longer have a surplus. And when that happens, that's when class divisions start to be apparent in a society. Then you start seeing evidence of people that are higher classes getting better food over people in the lower classes. So you see more prosperity over the lineage of the higher class people. And then that's where dynasties come from. So it kind of snowballs into this big whole class system that we know today as royalty, which wasn't even a thing pre-agriculture revolution.
Hunter and gatherer society is really, from what I saw, I found a few articles, even as early as like the 1940s. There's an article by Evans Pritchard that showed that there was this a group called the Nuer, N-U-E-R. Oh, I don't know how to pronounce that, but basically, even they had like the Nuer. They actually had a basically like a political organization. They were hunter and gatherer society, but they had leadership. Now, I do think what he says is true, is that he embellishes a little bit. Did stratification of society and the elite class develop? Yes, but it was always there in society. There always was going to be someone. There was always a version of have and have-nots. Now, did these things get worse when it's like, oh, okay, Mike makes all the grain, Steve stores it. Now Steve has all the grain, and he gets to control how much grain goes out. And oh, look at that, because he now controls the amount of grain that goes out and sets prices. Now Steve's rich and fabulous, is making money off of Mike. You know, it's one of those things where absolutely yes, I think it did lead to it and perpetuate it, but it was always there. Kind of like another one of his arguments where he talks about there was agriculture led to more sexism in general, that as more and more people, you know, as agriculture developed, women were basically forced more and more into very predefined roles. In an article by Ernestine Friedel, oh geez, I need to learn how to pronounce some of these fucking people's names.
Just say it with confidence, people won't know.
Ernestine Friedel.
Love it. He knows what he's talking about.
Goddamn right I do. She wrote an article called Society and Sex Roles. Basically, among hunter and gatherer societies, gender roles and sex roles, whatever, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be shitty, but for right now, same thing. If you're talking about hunting and gathering societies, they range from complete inequality to very defined roles of men and women to completely egalitarian, where men and women interchange roles. And I believe it was the Diamond article that talked about.
It did mention in the Diamond article that the women tended to be more of the foragers, and the men tended to be more of the hunters.
Right, but even then, there's also a way that you could still make that egalitarian, where it's like, okay, I'm stronger than Ray, so I'm going to go stab something, but Ray's better at organizing than I am, so she will organize a group of people to go gather the nuts and berries. And at the end of the day, if I come back with nothing, Ray shares with me, but the next day, if I kill a big animal and I have excess meat, then I'm going to give it to Ray. That, you know, that's more egalitarian.
Precisely.
And it's a division of labor in itself. It's being smart. I'm not going to say, okay, Steve there got injured last week on the hunt. I'm going to put Steve back out on the hunt again because he's a hunter. No, it's like, all right, Steve, today to heal, you're going to gather, and all right, what's that? Oh, you know, Mary's actually pretty fast and can run really far. We're going to put her as a hunter today because she has really good eyesight too, you know.
Yeah, they all shared. It wasn't just like it was like if one person scored in the group, then it's thought that they would share the bounty with the rest of the group.
Well, we even see this in agricultural groups too. Like certain societies are extremely patriarchal. I mean, even today, there's still a lot of societies still patriarchal. But even then, you had other societies like Sparta, for example, which is definitely an agricultural society where, yes, the men did the fighting, but the women are the ones who control the household and had the right to divorce their husbands. And, you know, even though it's you know, an older, you know, what we call ancient history, you know, relatively speaking, it's still, some societies had more egalitarian views on gender than others. It just depends on essentially what your cultural beliefs were and how they were created.
I thought the article made a really interesting point that I never would have thought of with the amount of babies that women had, because they were talking about in hunter-gatherers, they really could only have a baby once every 4 years, right? Because they didn't want to be constantly carrying around like 2 or 3 little babies and toddlers when they were moving from place to place. And when they settled down into these farming communities, they could be popping out babies once every 2 years, once a year, because they stayed in the same place. They didn't have to be lugging their babies around. Also, they needed help on the farm, so they wanted to have as many little hands as possible.
Yeah, exactly. The only, and I have no clue on this. I actually don't have any background on this one, but I'm by nature a skeptic. So just whenever I hear information like that, my first thought is always to be skeptical, not to be shitty, but just like, oh, and I wonder
Yeah.
if there was a difference in infant mortality rates. I don't have any idea at this time of recording, but I'm wondering too if like, was there higher infant mortality rates in one or the other, and they only had it, for example, you only had maybe a baby once every 4 years because you were so worried about losing another child, and pregnancy comes at a cost. That's a individual who can't do as much work, especially towards the end of their gestation, as the other members of society. And in general, was that also an issue too? That
Right.
in the
We don't know
hunter-gatherer
the
society,
exact
you need everybody to work. So if one woman is going to be out and she can't hunt or gather, is she can maybe that's why we only did it once every 4 years versus maybe it was a little safer in an agricultural society. Again, this would be playing devil's advocate. Or maybe there's a difference in infant mortality rates. Maybe it was higher in the agricultural side. Is why you had to have a baby more often. It's like, oh shit, I just lost baby number 5. Time to start making baby number 6 now.
Yes, it makes sense that babies would be only born once every 4 years in hunter-gatherer society, so they didn't have to pick them up and walk them around. But like you said, it could be because of the higher infant mortality rate. It could have been because they wanted the women to work more in the hunter-gatherers.
It could easily be. Or it could just be maybe they didn't need to have babies as often. They only had, maybe they really were healthier. And I'm just throwing out hypotheses because we don't know the answer. And yes, we can go to modern day hunter and gather societies and use them as comparisons. But again, we're not taking hunter gatherer societies where they were all over the world. They're only in very small portions of the world, and usually some of the more least desirable parts, because modern man, we do what we always do and just shove people in the corner and say, fuck you, this is mine now.
Yeah, that is what we do. So I was looking up online to kind of try to find some like Reddit or Reddit-like posts where people have posted what life would be like today if we never went to agriculture. We stayed in hunter-gatherers. And I
feel like Reddit is like both the best and the worst of the internet.
Oh, I love Reddit. But
I love Reddit too, but it's definitely the best and the worst of the internet. I've seen some amazing posts on Reddit, and I've seen some god awful posts. It just really depends on what subreddit you are. It's if you don't know Reddit, guys, very quickly, Reddit is an overall umbrella social media that has subreddits, and you have a subreddit for literally every fucking thing you'd ever imagine on the world. So here, guys, real quickly, say a topic, and the answer is yes. There's probably a subreddit on it. Okay, now that you chose your favorite topic, the answer is yes, there's a subreddit on it. And it depends on how well moderated it is. Some are amazing. I've learned a lot of things off of Reddit.
Oh, yeah. It's obviously one of those sites where you, like, can't believe everything that you read on it.
Yeah, you can't believe everything, but there's, like, I've seen literally, like, some Reddits that are legitimately, like, one level below scholarly.
Mm.
And, for example, Ask Historians, where I've actually seen actual citations. There's other ones that make me want to pluck out my eyeballs.
Yes, well, I mean, the whole tangent on Reddit that we're going right now is pretty useless because I didn't really find anything that good. Because
fair enough.
It's so difficult to like hypothesize what life would be like if we didn't choose the if we didn't choose the agrarian lifestyle, because there's an unlimited amount of things that could have been done. Because think of all the things that have been sprouted up because of agriculture, right? You can make, we already talked about how, that's where classism started, so where they had the social classes and royalty, and that brings in different jobs and occupations, and then we have a surplus of food, which leads to obesity, which leads to all these health issues. But manufacturing from agriculture can lead to medicines that cure that kind of stuff.
Right, exactly.
So it's a never-ending art.
Specialization of labor, increased lifespan. After a while, it took a long time, but increased specialization of labor. Then the founding of all these various subjects, like Ray mentioned, medicine. We also have arts. I obviously we had arts as hunter and gatherer, but we had things like philosophy and science and history and.
Yeah, and it's not like the hunter-gatherers were incapable of producing art or creative thinking.
Right.
It's just that they had less materials and less things that they can produce that art from.
Well, it's the difference between someone who's a jack of all trades and someone who's a specialist. If I spend a portion of my day hunting and a portion of my day gazing up at the stars and a portion of my day watching animals and a portion of my day, I might know a little bit about everything, but I'm not going to be a specialist. Versus if I spend all day in the forum debating other philosophers. Which one of us is going to be a better philosopher in the end, you know?
Yeah, the specialist, precisely.
Yeah, exactly. You know, if I spend all day with my thumb up my ass versus when all day, you know, actually like doing things, who's going to be better at shoving their thumb up their ass?
Either way, it's you.
Either way, it's me. Thank you, Ray.
I forgot to bring up this one kind of...
That's why Ray hasn't seen my left hand during this entire podcast.
I don't even think about it anymore. I used to, at the beginning of the podcast, I'd say, hands up, just to make sure that
And I would have to put both my hands up. She stopped doing it because she realized after a while both went up there.
He's not showing any hands at this point.
I have no hands up on the screen right now.
I just want to, you said something about the life expectancy, and this isn't quite the same thing. This is to do with height, but there was another little stat that was...
But height in general can be, I mean, even
indicative
though...
of
health, even though I wouldn't say in general, like, there are some cultures that are naturally shorter, like, for example, Japanese culture tends to be a little bit shorter. It does, like, I wouldn't use it today, like, to compare countries, unless there's really, like...
No, it's not like Shaq is healthier than...
Right.
Who's someone? Danny DeVito.
Danny DeVito's amazing. But, and as a Shaq, love both of you. If you're both listening to the podcast, hell yeah.
I think Shaq listens. He's written in a couple times.
Yeah, Shaq and Danny DeVito both have emailed us a couple times. But by the way, we're working on that.
Anthropologically speaking.
Right. In general, if you look across multiple generations, many generations.
Can be indicative of a person's health and their ability to grow. So in the article by Jared Diamond that we've been referencing, there was a study where skeletons from Greece and Turkey were studied, and they found that the average height towards the end of the Ice Age, when we were hunter-gatherers, for men it was 5'9", and for women it was 5'5", which I would say is pretty reasonable.
I would say that's pretty close to modern day standards for the most part.
I don't know in centimeters, so look it up if you want to.
Yeah, this is an American podcast. We use America.
That's our scale is America.
America. You are this many Americas.
So 5'9" for men and 5'5" for women in a hunter-gatherer society, and then
Ray is 5.6 Americas. I'm 5.10 Americas.
Yes. And then, how did you know how tall I was? Good job. And
I just, for some reason, oddly remember that.
Oh, do you remember what size my shoe is?
No. Why would I know? I don't do feet things. That's weird.
Oh.
Anyway, actually, how big is your shoe?
9.5. Big boy.
That's a pretty decent size.
Call me Big Bird. 5'9" for men, 5'5" for women. And then once agriculture started, the studies that were examined from 3000 BCE were on average only 5'3" for men and 5 foot for women. So that's
tiny.
5 to 6 inch difference. That's
a huge difference.
Yeah,
that's a huge difference.
Dating a guy that's 5'9" versus 5'3" is very different.
I have never dated a man of either one of those sizes, so I wouldn't know.
And I guess like the Turks and the Greeks nowadays, their average height isn't even as high as the hunter-gatherers were. So they still haven't caught up to their ancestors.
But I mean, yeah, that's one correlation effect. And I mean, overall, well, I guess we're not quite overall yet.
I mean, that's kind of like that's going back to the point we were talking about with like the increase, like bone disease and enamel deficiencies that we found in the farmers. It's just like more evidence to just suggest that the agrarian lifestyle might have not have been as healthy as once portrayed.
Or I would definitely argue that in certain instances, I mean, are we quite to the overall,
so.
kind of end? So I guess my argument is this, because if you read the article, if you could take a chance, you could find it pretty easily for free.
Literally just Google "the worst mistake in history of the human race" by Jared Diamond.
You should be able to find the article pretty easily. We got it through gettysburg.edu. But anyways, so it's pretty easily found, guys. Kind of my argument is, like, he brings up interesting points. If you read any of Jared Diamond's stuff, he brings up interesting points. And I'm not saying everything he's saying is wrong. I think the problem is what he does, he cherry picks a lot of his evidence. I actually found a really interesting blog called Living Anthropologically, and it is a blog by Jason Antrosio. He's a professor of anthropology and department chair at the Hartwick College. He kind of he breaks down other stuff, but he breaks down some of Jared Diamond's work, including the article we mentioned today and the more famous Guns, Germs, and Steel. And basically, I think the problem with a lot of this article that I read is that even though when he makes good points, he kind of cherry picks and uses singular sources rather than looking at the overall experience. And if you're a scientist, you know that your sample size matters. An N of 1 is never going to be as good as an N of 30, which is not as good as an N of 300, which is not as good as an N of 50,000.
N being the number of people in this study.
Not exactly. So if you look at societies, and I definitely think you could definitely argue that for certain cultures, agriculture did indeed make things worse. There's definitely a lot of issues that became new issues as agriculture.
Sure. Would you rather be an agricultural person, or would you rather be an agrarian in India in like...
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would definitely say in certain cultures, it was a step backwards. But I would say overall we made progress. And obviously, if you say what's better, modern man and woman in the 21st century or hunter-gatherer, yeah, we win by a long shot.
But I think that's also because we think of today now, which is us with the Industrial Revolution.
Right. With a lot of other modern medicine, modern plumbing, the Industrial Revolution, even other things like, trying to end racism and sexism and other cultural divides too, so on and so forth, that are these quality of life improvements.
Mm-hmm. Like think of us having this debate in the year, in the 11th century, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, let's take this argument, let's take it Central America 500 CE, or even, yeah, exactly, 870 CE.
Let's go to Tudor England. Living in Tudor England as a peasant and a farmer versus being a hunter-gatherer, I bet you anyone would rather be a hunter-gatherer. 20,000 years ago, rather being like a farmer in dirty Tudor England where you have lice and bubonic plague. And
exactly, where I'm 5'2", Ray is 5 feet tall, has already had 9 children at her age.
I understand the bubonic plague was not in the Tudor era. I don't need letters on that, but
yeah, exactly. But exactly, we're disease runs rampant. We have no cure for it. I have been sent off to go fight in some King's War and died at the age of 21. Ray, by the age of 21, has had 6 children. Exactly. Well, actually, that's still the same. And Ray has already had 6 children at the age of 21 and will die delivering her 10th child because she hemorrhages out and there's no treatment for it.
Right. That's what's going to happen. And I think when people read the Jared Diamond article, I think people tend to jump the gun a bit and think, what is the point of this article? Because I think some people might get a little twingy and think, oh man, is he suggesting that we go back to hunter-gatherer lifestyle? No, he's not.
No, that's not the conclusion he makes. That's definitely
there's
correct.
No way we can go back to hunter-gatherer lifestyle as an entire population. That is just completely absurd and could not be done. This is just making a very interesting point, saying like, hey, was this the best idea for mankind? And even if it wasn't the best idea and it wasn't a mistake of human history, we can't really go back from it. So it's not suggesting that we change our lifestyle now.
I think in general, what I would say, if you charted human progress, for the most part, let's say we're at the hunter-gatherer level, we're at somewhere on the chart. I'm not going to assign numbers to these, but like you're at some low mid-level, and 6, okay. And then as early agriculture develops, for some societies, it may stay at 6. I think for a few, it goes up to 7 or 8. I think actually for a lot, it probably drops down to 4 or 3. And then depending on where you're at in the world, if you take, let's say, 14th century China, like the Ming Dynasty, you're doing a lot better than 14th century Europeans or 14th century Central Americans. But then overall, like society is at various levels in between here. And then, like I said, maybe Ming Dynasty's at 15 now. These are arbitrary numbers, of course. And then as the entire world hits the Industrial Revolution, then we jump up to 100, 200. And so, yeah, it would make no sense to go back to 6 when even, yes, there's a lot of societies where agriculture did make things worse and you drop down to a far worse number. I think overall, finally, but in fairness though, and again, going back to that human clock that I mentioned earlier, from noon to 11:55, let's say, we were doing okay. Then from 11:55 to 11:59, we got worse. But now from 11:59 to midnight, we've exploded and become a hell lot more evolved. We can sit around, where Ray and I can sit around doing a podcast all day. Well, not all day, but you know what I mean. We can sit around doing a podcast, and we can use that as a way to better ourselves, and we don't just have to worry about, oh, where's our next meal? Oh, is it time for Rene to go out hunting again and potentially die to some animal?
Right, and I was saying before how it was pretty reasonable that the hunter-gatherers in Tanzania that we were talking about, how they only had to look for food like 14 to 19 hours a week, which I spend like 1 hour maybe at the grocery store.
So 14 hours a week is literally 2 hours a day.
Yeah, and I don't spend that much
we're talking
time
about 2 to 3 hours a day. Yeah, exactly. But like, there's a lot of people in modern society who do.
Oh,
especially a lot of people who like to cook things from scratch. Get that good home cooked meal. Type of people, they legitimately do spend that much time. So it's like, we could have done that same amount of time with a lot less stress and maybe just as much variety. Like, I mean, even now, there's a lot of modern people I'm trying to work on that myself, trying to diversify my diet.
It's hard.
It's just a lot more variety. It is, even though it's probably been easier than ever, ironically. But tis the fault of modern man, and that's a whole other podcast episode, quite frankly.
I was watching a YouTube video about this topic, and they use an example of like the 99-cent double cheeseburger at McDonald's, which doesn't exist anymore. But if you think about it, we lived in a lifetime where you get a double cheeseburger for 99 cents at McDonald's.
Yeah.
And the guy basically broke down all the ingredients in the burger. So like the salt, where the salt come from, where the pepper came from, where the beef came from, where the tomato came from, and the lettuce, and how it was stored, and how the bun was, and they talked about every little single piece of that, and how we could get all of those ingredients for only 99 cents, and the hunter-gatherers back in the day would not even be able to like perceive that we could get something that's so complex for 99 cents, and now we just don't even think about it. We just are like, here you go, and
shove it down our gullets. But I think ancient hunter and gatherer, depending on where they're at, they could get a variety. I think there is a truth to that. Like, they, like I said, they were able to go out. They knew seasonal patterns. They knew that they may not have been able to recreate the double cheeseburger, but at the same time, I think they had a little bit more. I think overall, if you could take one thing away from this episode, lovely listeners, is that ancient man hunter-gatherer society isn't quite as primitive and picking up turds off the ground as we like to make it out to be.
Yeah, they weren't as miserable as we like to think that they were.
No, I generally think it kind of just makes me realize too that we, especially when we frame a lot of our history from modern day, and I'm going to go back to the written word. So even the last few thousand BCE to modern day, and we really we always write about how miserable we are. What ancient man did, historic man did, medieval man, Renaissance man, industrial man, modern man, and back then they may not have been as miserable. You go out for the hunt, you get some food. The gatherers come back, and you just sit around and tell tales at the fire and wonder what is up there in the stars. And it's kind of in a way, almost a romantic existence. So
a lot of less responsibilities.
A lot less responsibility, and maybe we should romanticize ancient man a little bit more instead of looking at they were so savage, and they were us. We are them. In some ways, we still are them.
And
we're not that far removed from them. Yeah.
Where we are now as
exactly
as a race.
When you think about it too, I mean, that hunter-gatherer society is a good summation of why we are the dominant species on Earth, because we are the species that is the most adaptable, can come up with a solution to almost any problem, can put together complex variables and find a solution for it, and thrive in almost any situation. How many species can you say that about? Just us and the cockroach.
Definitely the cockroach. The cockroach
Yeah,
definitely
those
has.
little fuckers are invincible. I hate them.
Yeah.
Anyways, but
I think the whole point of this is just, keep an open mind because not everything that you learn is
yeah,
solid and
don't
true.
don't take
Everything's
don't take everything as
malleable.
dogma. Exactly. I would definitely say like this article is a good summation, especially that intro that I did very much love. Is that don't take everything for dogma. Earth is not the center of the solar system. The Earth is not the center of the Milky Way galaxy. We are not the only sentient species out there. Hell, we're probably not the only species to have perceived space travel.
Can I put a quick PSA before we leave?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, let's do
If
it.
you're living, especially like in a dirty city, like if you're like on the streets of New York
Cleveland,
City or like you're
Cleveland,
going down the Cleveland or you're on the Riverwalk in San Antonio,
Cleveland.
don't be picking up stuff and trying to be a hunter gatherer there. That's just my thing.
Yeah,
Or if you
yeah.
do, it's not our fault. That's your own decision as a human.
Don't pick up turds. Don't pick up berries that you just find on the side of the street.
Don't eat
Don't
the
eat
yellow
that.
snow.
Don't eat the yellow snow. That one mushroom, like I said, there's a 30% chance you'll eat it and you'll be fine, or it'll go good on a hamburger. There's a 30% chance you'll eat it and you'll discover God, and then there's like a 40% chance you'll just be dead.
That's
So
true
don't
for
do it.
everything in life.
Exactly. Just remember, guys, just don't eat random shit you find on the ground. Don't run around like trying to like catch wild animals in downtown metropolitans that they have diseases.
Yeah, so that pretty much does it for
Yeah.
today. Yeah, thanks for listening. I hope that
I
was at
hope
least
you
somewhat
got
interesting.
smarter and stupider,
I definitely
and
got stupider.
I definitely got stupider. I think I got a little smarter too. If you like this episode, guys, let us know. It's something Ray and I. So if just kind of like a quick discussion about the podcast. Wait, hold on. What's that? It's time for the ad break. Uh-oh.
Oh, I've been waiting for this.
Hey guys, it's Ray and Rene over here. We have a new product for you. Are you excited about this product as I am, Ray?
Oh, Renee, I'm so excited. Tell them what it is.
So we just came out with our new hunter and gatherer model of Ray and Renee's old-timey hunter and gatherer spear. Now, this can be used to hunt whatever you want, whenever you want. Just think about it as, like, Ray, can you describe your spear real quick?
Ooh, my spear is long and
Uh-huh.
thin and very aerodynamic.
Okay, I would definitely say Ray's spear is very long. She says it's thin, but quite frankly, I think it has some heft to it. I would even dare say some girth.
You would.
And I would say Ray's spear is very good at penetrating whatever she targets with it. Now, unfortunately, I have an older model spear, so sometimes my spear doesn't work as well when it's not fully utilized well.
It's
Also, when it's cold
curved to the
outside,
left.
I feel like also when it's cold outside, my spear, I feel like it doesn't have as much length on the shaft as it normally does.
Mhm.
And a lot of times I have trouble using it when I drink too much whiskey.
So those hunter-gatherers in Siberia might want to get my spear.
Yeah,
Whereas if you're
get the
in
Ray
some place
model.
like
Yeah,
Africa, it doesn't
yeah.
matter as much. You're gonna be
Because
able to
remember,
afford
Ray's spears penetrates really well.
it. Mhm.
And remember, guys, the most important thing about using your spear is penetrating whatever you want.
Feel the penetration.
All right, guys, remember, once again, go to and get Rene and Ray's old-timey spear on our website at you'rejuststupidpodcast.com.
Make sure you have that safe search on when you Google it. So with that outro, that was hunter-gatherers going into agrarian society, the
Yeah.
Neolithic age, and whether it was a mistake or not. It could have been a mistake, but we ain't really coming back from it. Just like Rene.
Nope. I am definitely a mistake. Darwin should have aborted me, and thus there was a reason for my nickname today, guys.
There we go. Full circle. All right,
Yep.
guys. Well, we'll see you next time for
Love
another
you.
episode of You're Just Stupid.